You are listening to the New Book of Daniel podcast. Hello and welcome to the New Book of Daniel show. My name is Daniel Bobinski. I will be your host on this adventure. Today we have with us a special guest, Sharron Angle. Now you may remember her name because she ran against then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, and then he's the senator in Nevada back then in 2010. And she's also just a strong constitutionalist. There's no one who wants to see the country return to its constitutional roots more than Sharon. She's also part of this organization called the Election Integrity Project of Nevada. And she wants to see regular voting happen instead of this mass mail-out voting that Nevada has chosen to do. Some of these states are just sending ballots out to everybody who's on the list. Nevada has over 40,000 names that are possibly or likely fraudulent or dead or moved or whatever. And it's just opening up the state to all sorts of voter fraud. So her organization, she heads that up, she is trying to get that overturned so before the ballots get sent out. It got all the way up to the Nevada District Court. It got shot down. They did say she had standing, but they found some reasons to shoot it down. I read the judge's statements, and I was kind of shaking my head. Thankfully, she has decided to appeal to the Nevada Supreme Court. They have decided to review the case, so that's going to be happening here in the next day or so. I wanted to get this information out. You need to know what's going on. This is going to be opening up the state of Nevada for all sorts of voter fraud. So let's just go right into our conversation with Sharon. We'll let her tell you more about it. All right, well, we're here with Sharron Angle. And Sharon, I want to say a huge thank you for joining us on the New Book of Daniel.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always great to be able to come and talk about the things that we feel are really important to our culture and to our lives today. And I think there's nothing more important than this next election coming up.
I would agree with you. And everybody always says it's the most important election of our lifetime. And usually they're talking about the country. I think in our case in 2020, this is the most important election in the history of the world. It's going to set the direction and the tone for what happens. And there's lots of stuff happening. Oh gosh, we could have hours of conversation. But the reason I asked you on today was to talk about this what I want to call battle against election fraud in Nevada. You are with the Election Integrity Project of Nevada. Could you tell us a little bit about that organization and how you got involved?
Oh, certainly. In 2009, I think all of us were reeling after the election then. That was I think, a watershed election as well, because the president then said he would change our culture, and certainly he did. And we were looking for it. I mean, when he got elected, we saw that something big was going to change our country. And we saw that during that 2010 election, especially, there were things going on that just didn't make sense. I ran against Harry Reid during that 2009-2010 period. And at the end of the election, 10 minutes after the polls closed, I had gone in at the beginning at 7 o'clock. When the polls closed, I was winning by 5 to 15 points. By 10 after, I had lost by 5 points, which was a shift of 9. Well, we found out it was 9.3%. And the reason we know that is because every race on that ballot in Clark County, which is Las Vegas, Nevada, had shifted by 9.3%. That's a statistical impossibility. And so I became really concerned about what was going on. And I had met this lady in California who was also concerned. She had started the Election Integrity Project. And she said, we're looking at this. We're looking in California at it right now and saying, what is happening to the state of Reagan, to the land of Reagan? We have changed. And so over these past 10 years, we have been fighting in California. Now we have a chapter in Arizona, one in Nevada, one in Arkansas. We just continue to expand across the United States, saying that it's got to be more than just going to the polls and getting out the vote. That's what poll watchers usually do. They go, they look, they see who hasn't voted. They call them and they say, get down here and vote. No, we're going and we're gathering evidence of this corruption in our elections, and we're taking it to court. That's the whole purpose, is to fight it at that level. We want to fight it and keep that vote from being cast if we feel like it is a corrupt vote. And then the second thing is, when we find that corruption, we want to clean it out, and we find out that usually we have to go to court in order to get it cleaned up.
And the courts in our country have gotten bogged down. And we have a lot of, and when I say bogged down, I mean like they drag their feet sometimes.
Yes.
And I think you have people with ideological value systems, not principled value systems, and they will obviously cast their ballots, and their judges will find things that way. And that's why we have the big fight with the Supreme Court right now. The same reason the Democrats know that Trump is nominating somebody who doesn't share their value system, their ideology. So judges are in place, and yes, they need to get reelected. And we could do a whole talk about how I think how we elect judges needs to change in this country. That's probably a topic for a different show. But you have this thing going on in Nevada right now, as it kind of came about as a result of the COVID situation, and many states are doing this now, where you guys are doing this all-in mail thing, right? And tell us about how this came about, and what your organization has done thus far.
Well, you correctly identified the issue, which is the China virus, COVID-19. It has become the excuse to take away constitutional rights. And one of those most basic rights is our right to vote. In the history of election corruption, we know from the beginning that if it isn't an in-person vote, it's going to be more easily corrupted. Anytime that you have a mail-in ballot, in fact, even absentee ballots, as much as we try to keep those clean so that there's no corruption, we can't do it because you're not seeing that person. They're not actually before you, showing who they are, identifying themselves. Their ballot can be corrupted. An absentee ballot is always a less secure ballot. So the whole push against our right to vote has been this universal mail-in ballot, totally different from an absentee ballot. Mail-in ballots are just sent to everybody that's on the registration roll, whether they've requested that ballot or not, and that's the key. An absentee ballot is a requested ballot, so the person has had to identify themselves first before they get their ballot in the mail. With universal mail-in, no such requirement. So our legislature went into a special session at over a weekend, and in the middle of the night, well, it was midnight, just a little after midnight, they passed this law for universal mail-in ballot. But even more in that law is things that we have been out of hand rejecting as illegal: ballot harvesting, same-day voter registration, the targeting of vulnerable populations, people who might live in an assisted living situation or a nursing home or a group home. These folks, 65 or older, can have someone sign for them. So now you have a ballot that comes in and you can't even do a signature verification on it because somebody else can sign for you. Also within that law, it says that those signatures that come in don't have to be the official signature that you signed when you registered to vote. It can be your initials, it can be your nickname, it can be pretty much anything that kind of shows up is an acceptable signatures. So for all of those reasons, we said this law cannot stand.
That is unfathomable to me. That you do not have to even have a signature. Nevada has said that even just initials will be sufficient.
Well, you have to have something. It has to be signed, but the signature does not have to be the one that you signed when you registered to vote. So there's several ways, of course, to confound that. And they say this in the law. Your initials are good. Your nickname is good. Someone else, if you're 65 years of age or older or handicapped in some way, someone else can sign for you. So it may not even be you actually putting pen to paper.
And I think to any logical person, this just screams that this is ripe for fraud. I mean, you could easily have bad
open
intentions.
Door, right?
Beg pardon?
It's an open door.
Yeah, I mean, you know what's really weird? I've been a executive coach for 30 years, and I'm a certified behavioral analyst and a certified motivational analyst. And one of the things of being in the motivational analyst side of things is people tend to assume that everybody has the same motivations as them. You know, I talk to clients who are very money motivated, and they think that everybody's money motivated. That's their paradigm. Or somebody who is very community minded and self-sacrificing. They think that everybody is or should be that way. And I think the same thing rolls over into the integrity side of things. When you have someone who has strong integrity, they believe that everybody else has that same integrity. Nobody's going to cheat like that. I would never cheat. So why would they cheat? And they just don't understand that you have two people with different sets of values. Those values drive behavior. And I think that's what we're dealing with here is we have unethical people in our society. Tell me we don't, right? We have unethical people in our society who will take advantage of these laws. So however well intended these laws might be, people will take advantage of them. Now, one of the things that you told me off camera before we went online was when you ran for Senate against Harry Reid, that you found that there was substantial. Well, I'll let you explain it. Go ahead.
Well, I think I even in the introduction here, when we first started, I talked about that race just a little bit, and that was that race had changed from 7 o'clock to 7:10, from me being up in the polls 5% to being down in the polls 5%, and we found that was a 9.3% change. When we started to really look into it, we found coercion of voters, we found busloads of people being buzzed to the polls and given a ballot and told this is how you will vote. They got Target cards to go to Target, gift cards. They got Starbucks coffee for this. They were bussed in from other states. We know that they were voting in Arizona or living in Arizona, now voting in Nevada, living in California, voting in Nevada. We've seen this cross state lines thing happening in other states too. So every form of corruption that you can find in an election, we found in 2010. We don't have it all documented, but we are starting to document that, which is interesting. I lost that race by 41,424 votes. We have now found 42,000 votes from 2010 and prior that shouldn't be on the books. They're either dead people, they are people that only voted once, they've voted twice in other elections, all kinds of little anomalous things for these. So it's interesting that there's these 42,000 votes out there. Also, coincidentally or not, I don't believe in coincidence. I think that there are no coincidences, but President Trump lost Nevada by those same 40,000 votes. So to me, there's just too much circumstantial evidence to say let's not assume that everybody's a good guy in Nevada. I think the founders actually gave us the balance of power because they said that they understood that the nature of man is not inherently good. And those of us who are believers, we understand that from the very beginning. You don't get very far in your Bible before you understand that the nature of man is sinful. We teach children not to be bad. They get it. We teach them to be good. And
Right.
so I think as a lawmaker, you go into it with a very Pollyanna look at on life. If you think that any man is by nature a good guy, no such thing. We train ourselves in integrity. We train ourselves in good behavior. So it's one of those things when you make law, you always think about, well, what's the penalty? If they don't obey the law, how do we enforce it and what's the penalty?
So you've taken this to court already. You've already challenged these
Yes.
new voting laws, these new ballot laws that they passed at midnight. What happened with that?
Well, we lost the case, and it was the lowest form of scrutiny that we could lose it by. The scrutiny was they made a rational argument or the rational basis. Of course, anybody that wakes up, you hope that they have rational thought, and anybody that's in the legislature, you hope they're rationally thinking, and they based their rational thinking on COVID-19. But I think the more that we get into this, the more we see that is not a real good basis for anything. In fact, we showed that the Secretary of State herself said there's no real COVID reason why we can't go to the polls and vote like we regularly do. So that was the basis for the loss, and he defines that well through 30 minutes of talking about this rational basis.
Yeah, well, okay. For those of you who are tuning into this, Sharon sent me the video, which I watched, and then she also sent me the court documents, which I've gone through. And I'm looking at. I just want to read a couple things, if I may. Here, this is the judge's words, right? To that justicable controversy to allow a judge to afford judicial relief, and this is long established. So he's talking about some legal philosophies. That courts, judges, guys like me ought to involve themselves in matters where there's an existing controversy, not merely the prospect of a future problem. I read that, I listened to that, and I'm shaking my head going, what on earth kind of logic and reasoning is that?
If you look back, we asked for a temporary restraining order. This is the same kind of a restraining order that you would get on an abusive husband. When the wife says, I think I'm in fear for my life, you need to step in here and restrain him. And that was really what we were asking. We think there's going to be an abuse at the polls. We need a restraining order against this law to prevent that abuse. And what he was saying, well, the abuse has to happen first before I'm going to step in. Later on in the transcript, you'll see where he says, hopefully, if it is abuse, someone will prosecute. Well, we know that prosecution for voter fraud is very limited because it's hard to catch these guys.
I saw that, and my initial thinking, as soon as I saw this, okay, so you catch the guy for voter fraud, but the person who got all the illegal votes is still holding office. And are they
Exactly.
going to take that person out of office after they find out there's illegal votes? That never happens.
No.
We could talk about, that's a whole.
It makes you shake your head, Daniel.
Yeah.
It just makes you shake your head when you read this stuff.
But you listen, I mean, and he's, I think he's just being so condescending, if I may be so bold, just in how I'm reading this. It's a good argument, but I think it's hypothetical. That's what he said.
Well, I think that condescending attitude, if you had really, when you look at the video, you see he's kind of smiley and patronizing and playing for an audience. Well, I got to looking up the guys on the other side, these lawyers that came in to defend against us. And I found out that these are George Soros lawyers. So there's probably a reason here for him to be so
Oh, fill me in on
congenial with them.
fill me in on that. They are George Soros lawyers. Now, for those of you who don't know who George Soros is, the dude is evil. He has no conscience. He likes his goal in life. He's pushed. I think he's 89 years old. He's spending billions of dollars to try to undermine the United States. And I've done some research, and you can read my work on Uncover DC about that. But Sharon, how do you know these lawyers are George Soros lawyers?
Well, actually, I got clued in when I interviewed you on my show, and you said Coy Perkins, and my ears picked up, and I said, Coy Perkins, that is the law firm that has filed this intervention against us, and they sent an attorney, Anna from Seattle, and then they had a deposition by Mark Elias from Washington, D.C. And as I began to investigate for myself, not that I don't believe you, Daniel, but I just decided I need to know myself.
Sure.
And I went out there, and it's easily found. All you have to do is say, who does George Soros hire as his attorney? And Coy Perkins just pops right up there. $5 million is one of the figures that I saw, but it gets deeper.
Oh yeah, and FYI for the record, it's Perkins Coy, but
oh, sorry.
You got the names there. So he uses Perkins Coy, and Perkins Coy is also the law firm that handles all the Democratic National Committee issues. So what you're basically telling us, Sharon, is that we have the Democratic National Committee. Their same law firm is sending people to fight against you in Nevada.
And their only cases are these kinds of cases. When you look at it, they are determined to fight anything that is against mail-in ballots, is against ballot harvesting, is against same-day registration, any kind of election, what they call interference, and they're going to say that this is disenfranchising of vulnerable populations. Well, I say it is actually a targeting of these vulnerable populations by nefarious folks. And I think if anybody's been really watching what James O'Keefe has done with his Project Veritas here in Minneapolis, you are scandalized by Ilhan Omar's participation in ballot harvesting and paying for those votes. I was just amazed that they have the kind of money to put into this, $200 to $300 a vote, $800 per vote for every ballot harvester. So here you go. We're into it deep now, and I would really encourage people to look at that, because when he goes back to this idea that this is mythical, we are now pressing forward, and we get to introduce that as evidence for our new case.
So yeah, so for our listeners, you lost at the district court level, but you are appealing, and it did get accepted by the Nevada Supreme Court.
Yes, we did. That was a shock. My attorney said there's 3 ways this thing can come down. One of them is they can just refuse to hear your case. So we had a 33% chance at that point of getting heard and possibly winning the case, because that's one of the outcomes. When they took our case, we're now up to a 50-50 chance of not only are we going to get heard, but we might actually win this. And we didn't go for the temporary restraining order. We're now at the writ of mandamus. That's what we're going before the the Nevada Supreme Court with. And we're asking them to completely cast down this law as unconstitutional and illegal.
Well, and I think you have more evidence for yourself now too, because
yes,
you do have the James O'Keefe video of all the money being handed out for votes, and the people.
Well, we also have the case of the 700,000 votes in Texas, and we have the case of 10,000 votes in Wisconsin. It's just exploding around us. It's almost as if we can go to the judge now and say, not only is this not mythical, but it's happening daily that we're uncovering this kind of fraud, and you must decide in our favor, because If you don't, you're opening Nevada. You're just opening Nevada to this, to election fraud, and the consequences will be on your heads.
Now, I was having a conversation about this the other day with somebody, and why the election's integrity is so critical. It's because if we have so much election fraud, then we don't have any faith in the people that the elections are valid. And therefore we have no faith in our government, and the government crumbles. And I think that is very true. It's vital that we maintain a faith in our electoral system, that we trust the person who is sitting in office actually belongs there because of the votes.
Well, it's the basis of a democratic republic, and that's what we are. We're not a democracy. We're a democratic republic, which means that we represent our voice. And when our voice is not the one that we sent, we have no voice. And I made a documentary called Stolen Choices, because that's exactly what happens in a corrupted election. Your choice is stolen. And that's why we need help from all over the nation. I think that people say, if it's happening in the West, what does it have to do with me? It has everything to do with you. We talked about election integrity projects starting in California, in the land of Reagan, what has happened there and how it is now spreading. It is the petri dish. They start everything there as an experiment. And when it works there, they export it into the neighboring states. So that Nevada is next shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. And that your state is next should not be a surprise to you. So if we are really serious about saving our democratic republic and our right to vote, we need to get alongside people who are fighting the battle in the trenches as we speak, because these make precedent. These court cases, I have an attorney friend, she says these court cases sometimes make bad law, but they'll use that bad law to reinforce another bad law. And so that's what we're talking about here, is what happens in Nevada will set the stage for what will happen in your state. And when you go to fight your own battle, they'll be calling upon this Nevada law that this judge has made, which is totally unconstitutional, but that's the way we're working now.
Yes.
They do legislate from the bench, but that law then will be used to kill your fight in your own state.
So I found, so the judge noticed that you had standing.
Yes.
And I find, first of all, that whole do you have standing things to be a very curious thought process, because that was a big argument with the lawsuits against Obama when he was running. When people were filing lawsuits, they did not believe him to be a U.S. citizen. They said, well, you don't have standing. It's like, wait a minute, I'm a U.S. citizen. So this man, if he becomes president, is going to create laws or enact laws or enforce laws. He'll propose laws that will affect my life. And therefore, I do have standing. And the judges will, no, you don't have standing. And I found it completely, I'll just use the word asinine, that the judges, there's much better words to use, but that's the one that comes to mind. But these judges were saying, they're throwing it out. It was an excuse to throw out the court case. It's a very simple, easy excuse. So I was glad to see that the judge gave you standing. But here is something else.
Well, and that sets a precedent. I hope people will understand that when it comes to their court case, they can use that Nevada decision, even though we lost, to support standing in their own state, because every citizen should have standing, especially on this issue, as you point out.
Mm-hmm. And then your judge then says that he's talking about the balancing the merits and the harms of the case. And he says a reasonable probability that essentially if I allow the Secretary of State to continue, shall that cause irreparable harm? And he goes, I have to say I do not find that the plaintiffs will have a likelihood of success on the merits. In other words, he goes, I don't think that there's going to be irreparable harm. And I say, wait a minute, you're a citizen of Nevada. And if someone gets elected president or whatever in even a local office using these fraudulent ballots, then they're going to create laws and rules that's going to affect your taxes and how the laws are created in your state. which could cause you to lose income or lose rights. Yes, there will be irreparable harm. And I don't think these judges are thinking. It's like, I want to teach my clients. Everybody has thoughts, but not everybody thinks. And I think a lot of judges don't think this way.
I think the irony of it is that later on, he admits that he's elected. Our judges, even on the Supreme Court here in Nevada, are elected. He's an elected judge. And so his election could be bitten by this same bug. So what happens, Judge, when you become the victim of election corruption? Then will you say, oh my gosh, this is irreparable harm? Or will you just suck it up like you're telling the rest of us to get on your big girl pants and don't talk to me about this? You know, you lose an election. Well, better luck next time. I don't think the people like that argument, and I don't think that he's being genuine when he makes that argument, because he, as standing in an elected place, he wants a fair and honest election just like the people do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does. And he will suffer irreparable harm if there is fraud against him. Now, tell me a little bit about your post office rules, because these different states that are enacting this have different places. It looks like, and I'm going to read this, I'll accept that there's a protocol that has been described by Mr. Zunio that helps me feel a little more comfortable about this postmark issue. My thought is, if the post office does postmark all these ballots, even though they're prepaid, as Mr. Hansen has said, that would be wonderful. What's he talking about there?
Well, most bulk mail, and ballots are bulk mail. They come with a prepaid postage on them, and it's both ways. You get it that way, you send it back that way. And what they're saying is that since it's bulk mail, it won't have a postmark in it, because that's the policy of the post office. They don't postmark prepaid or bulk rate mail. Except they're saying now, in the case of ballots, they will postmark them. And we couldn't argue that. We couldn't find anything that said that they would postmark it. Everything that we found said they won't postmark it. But they are saying, oh no, there's a new regulation. We're looking for that. We did find where they're talking about it. So we're assuming that they're actually going to do this. But interestingly, in the law, it says if it doesn't have a postmark, it's assumed to have been mailed on or before the election day. So those ballots coming in, it's assumed, yeah, that if it doesn't have a postmark, it's assumed to have come in on time. So that guy that arrives on November the 4th with a trunk load of ballots that are not postmarked and says, oh, I just found these, boom, they're assumed to have been voted or balloted or mailed on or before the due date and must be accepted. And that's what we're challenging. We're saying it doesn't matter if they are postmarked. We're saying that unpostmarked mail needs to be rejected because we can't tell if it was voted on time or not. And you can't wait for the result of an election. And we've seen this happen in Minnesota and Washington, where a decision was made. The election was determined. There was a winner. In fact, in one case in California, the winner already went back to Washington, D.C. to set up their office. And lo and behold, all of these ballots were found after the election, assumed to have been on-time ballots, changed the result of the election. That person was not elected. Then the opponent took his place. So I think that once again, we have irreparable harm. The person who was supposed to be in that office is now removed because they find these ballots.
That is the way the law reads now?
That's the way that's the way this new law reads. If we let it stand, it says that if it doesn't have a postmark, it is assumed to have arrived on time.
That is unfathomable to me.
Unbelievable, isn't it? And you know, we're limited to 55 100 words, I think, in our writ of mandamus, so we can't make every argument. There's lots of great arguments against this law, but we had to pick out the most egregious things to try and argue it, the things that we thought we could win on.
You're only allowed 5,500 words?
Yeah.
That's a spit in the wind. You can't.
Isn't it? Isn't it? Lawyers can say more than that in one breath.
My gosh. All right. So
we are truly hamstrung by our legal system.
So the Nevada legislature was convened and they passed this law after midnight on a special session. And
That's right.
Sounds like there's all sorts of, shall we say, opportunities for fraud. And you guys, your organization, the Election Integrity Project for Nevada, has taken it and challenged it in court. And the district court said, no, we're going to let it stand. And you've appealed to the Nevada Supreme Court. Where are we going with that? What's the process? When does that happen?
We're not sure. They said all of our arguments had to be in by today, so we're right on the cusp of this. They will give us a hearing date. It has to come soon because of the election coming up, of course, and now we're almost at the 30-day mark now. The ballots are being mailed out next week. So they would have to recall all that mailing. There would be quite an expense to recall that. And in fact, they could be in mailboxes already. You know, they could have been already delivered to the Postal Service now for that delivery date. We're just not sure exactly how they're going to decide on that. The longer they delay, of course, the more they have an opportunity to declare it a moot question because the ballots are already out. We've got to go forward and we can't recall all of this. Of course, that's nonsense. They can recall anything they like. The court can make a decision to say, we've decided that this is unconstitutional, it's illegal, it will cause irreparable damage, and we're going to continue with an election the way it should be done. Of course, the Secretary of State will probably make that argument that, no, we can't get that done in 30 days. You know, there's going to be all of these arguments about how it's too close to the election. So we're anticipating that. We just don't know how that will go. You know, it's one of those things. But honestly, Daniel, if we give it up, if we just don't fight, we lose. And I think that's the message to every American. If you don't stand up and fight, you are going to lose. If you stand up and fight, trust God. We say that on our money. We say that it's our motto. In God we trust. Well, here's a time to put actions to faith, and that's what we've done. We've said we're going to trust God that in this, we're going to at least have our voice heard, that people will see what is wrong here. And, you know, we may lose this battle, but it's only a battle. The war is on. I've heard, you know, many say that in the 60s, they had a revival of love. And we all know that, love and peace. It was a revival of love. People came because Jesus loves me. They say that this next revival is going to be a revival of war. People are going to be seeing the division and they're going to make a choice. What side are you on? That's that Joshua's decision. You know, as for me and my household, we'll serve the Lord. Well, I think we're going to all be put to that test, that choice. Where are you going to stand on this?
I totally agree with you on that. I mean, some of the biblical teachings I've been listening to, you know, the people who are saying that this has been a year of shaking, that God has been shaking the nation, and that he's separating, you know, I don't want to say the sheep from the goats, but he's basically taking out the middle ground. In other words, take a stand, like you said, make a choice. Who are you going to serve? And I think there's a lot of people. I was listening to a sermon last night on YouTube, and the guy was saying, you need to realize, just take the label Democrat and Republican off of things. Take a look at the platforms. as to what you believe. And you may have been raised in a certain political party your whole life, and there's a whole emotional attachment to that because your parents voted that way. But you need to take a look at these platforms, take a look at your faith. What does the scriptures say? And then so which one do I really want to agree with here? I mean, I don't want to counter scripture. So let's go ahead, and I think that's a great way to address that. By the way, I as you were talking earlier about the making the decision and how late we are in the process, it is, they're gaslighting us like crazy. And to use that term, it goes. People unfamiliar. You hear that term a lot more nowadays. But there's I'm probably going to write a post on it or a column on it over at Uncover DC. But it comes from a movie called Gaslight back in the 30s of a guy when they used to have gas lights in the house instead of electric lights. And he'd be adjusting the lights in the house, and his wife would say, "Did you adjust the lights?" And he'd go, "No, I didn't." And he convinced her that she was nuts. He basically lied to her, and he was gaslighting her. That's how the term came to be. Is telling somebody that what they see with their own eyes, and then you tell them, no, that's not the case. And we're seeing that all the time. We're being lied to. It's not worth saying that you're being lied to, you're being fooled. Even what you see with your own eyes isn't true. So we are being gaslit. And I want to take a look at this interesting piece right here. The judge said that judges should not involve themselves in political questions. If it's a legislative function, that means it's a political question and I stay out. Going, what kind of gaslighting logic is that? It is the purpose of the judiciary to act as a co-equal branch of government to decide whether or not an act of the legislature is constitutional or not. So this is, in my opinion, gaslighting. He's saying, I don't have to decide on this because it's a political question, and so I'm staying out of it. That's a lame excuse. It is every bit of his responsibility to determine whether something is constitutional or not constitutional.
Well, and interestingly, the point he was making is that we have a law here in Nevada that says that the state cannot pass down an unfunded mandate to a lower jurisdiction or a lower government and expect them to pay for it. They either have to fund it or it's illegal. It's against the law. They've broken the law. And so we were saying that not only is this unconstitutional, denying one man, one vote and equal access under the law, under the 14th Amendment, which is contained within our Nevada Constitution as well, but it's also an illegal act. They broke the law. And he's saying, well, it's okay for them to break that law because that's a political law. Oh my goodness. Now we're getting into a realm of, oh, what happens to all my constitutional rights if you won't decide on a law and you won't decide on the Constitution because it might get into politics? Does that mean that my First Amendment right is subject to your to being political? My governor's being very political these days in saying that I can't go to church with more than 50 people, but I can go down to a casino with more than 50 people. I can't go to church and sing, but I can go down to the casino and listen to live entertainment. We watched him do it the other day. So, it's definitely a First Amendment issue. And yet it's also political because he's made it that way. So now this judge is saying, well, don't bring that to my court. Don't bring anything that smacks of politics to my court because I'm not going to judge on that. I'm going to just let them decide over there in that jurisdiction that it's up to them politically to make that decision.
That is sad. It is lame.
Bad law, right?
It's gaslighting because he's telling you a falsehood, and because he's wearing a black robe, he expects you to believe it. I
Well,
am.
and isn't that what we've been complaining about with this judicial system? That's why, I felt bad when I lost to Harry Reid, but after he won that election, he went back to the U.S. Senate as the majority leader and said to the Senate, we're not going to require cloture or 60 votes anymore to confirm a Supreme Court judge. We're going to just go to the nuclear option, which is just simple majority. And then after that, the one who has been using this nuclear option has been the current president. When he's appointed now, we're going to see the third judge. And so I have to say, the judiciary has been a big deal to us because we come up against it when the judges start to chip away at our constitutional rights to say, well, that law doesn't apply here, but it applies over here. All of this legislating from the bench or neglecting to even make a judgment call based on superfluous, really stupid reasons, you have to say, okay, that was worth the loss in 2010 just to get some good judges on the bench who won't do that to us. So I have to say that it has become, I guess, the highest priority in an American's life is to get justice.
Yes, and mercy. Okay. Coming from a biblical perspective, you need both. Because you don't want to be on just the justice side of God. You want to be on his mercy side. But yeah, we need to have justice in our system here. We've been going too much on the mercy side in our country. By the way, I want to quickly just address the thing about going to church. You had talked about going to a casino and not being able to go to church. I saw a great meme the other day of here's an airplane flight full of people, everybody's wearing a mask. And then the next picture was the church empty. And all the meme says was, this has never been about your health. You can have a whole plane full of strangers wearing masks and that's perfectly fine, but you can't go to church. So there is this, you mentioned earlier about the battle and the war. We might lose this battle, but we need to keep fighting the war. And I think as our brothers and sisters of faith start waking up to some of this with this shaking that's going on, we realize, wait a minute, we need to step up. I think the church has really dropped the ball in the past 100 years. It's gotten way too comfortable. The Johnson Amendment, making it illegal to preach politics from the pulpit. And that has really scared off a lot of people. They're afraid of losing their tax break because of their politics. But people need to wake up and realize that, hey, if I don't do something, all it takes for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. And we've got too many people who are doing nothing who are very good men because they're afraid of losing that little tax break that they get.
And I have to, in their defense, I have to say that some people don't know what to do. So I'm going to give you a few things that you can do right now. One of them is to go to EIPNV.com. That's Election Integrity Project Nevada.com, EIPNV.com. Push the donate button. That's really actually the easiest thing to do because our founding father says you must. To this, we pledge ourselves. We pledge ourselves to each other. I thought that was very interesting. We pledge ourselves to each other, our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Well, the easiest thing for us to do is to give our fortunes. It's a little more difficult to give our sacred honor. We all want our good name to stay our good name, and it's hard to be defamed. But when we stand up and say, this is the truth, we're going to get defamed. That's, Facebook is full of defamation of character and slander and people defriending and unfriending and whatever. Twitter is the same way. We know that the money's the easiest. Our sacred honor is pretty darn hard. But I'll tell you, it's your life that really, that's where the rubber meets the road. Are you willing to spend your life fighting for freedom, fighting all the way to a place where you may not win, but by golly, it's worth it even if you don't win, you have to stand up for right. So I'm asking you to do the easiest thing, and that is your fortune. Just go there, push the donate button. If you live in Nevada, even if you don't live in Nevada, the next thing that I'm asking you to do is go down there and give some of your life to this election. Volunteer on your election board. We need people on that side watching the system to make sure that the government's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, obeying those policies and procedures that are put in place for a good reason to catch that. If you have an election integrity project group in your state, you need to get with them because they'll train you in those policies and procedures. You can be on the inside of the poll, watching what everybody's doing, watching as the voters come in, hearing who's voting, looking at your list and seeing if that's one of those challenged voters that we're going to stop that vote from even being cast because that person is fraudulent. And then you can also volunteer to be on the outside of the polls, watching those buses come in, taking video pictures. We've had it pretty much delivered to us now across the board. If you've got a video, that counts. So get out your iPhone or your other phones that take videos of those buses, their license plate, who's getting off those buses, send it on to somebody else at the next polling place and say, this guy was just here with this busload of people. I have a friend that he got one 6 minutes later, jumped on that bus and said, I'm here to enforce the law. Yeah, I know that this bus just offloaded a bunch of people 6 minutes away at another polling place, and they voted. If you're here to vote again and you were on that this bus at that time, you're voting twice. That's against the law. It's a federal felony, and I'm here to make sure that you go to jail because I'm going to be taking your picture as you get off this bus. And if this is your second time, you're going to be prosecuted for this. He says, now, if you haven't, if this is your first time to vote, please get off the bus and go vote. He got off the bus, they closed the doors, they talked for a few minutes, they drove off. Nobody got off that bus. And by 12:30 that day, every bus had stopped going to the polls. Why? Because somebody had his phone out and was taking pictures and said, I will not stand for this, not on my watch. And so I'm saying that, on election day and all those days leading up to election day when people are voting, you can be a part of the solution. Those kinds of things stand up in court. We may have to take it to court to prove fraud, but I'll tell you, a video on Facebook is worth 1,000 words, isn't it?
And that kind of boldness, but that's one of the things, that's the danger of having same-day registration and voting.
Absolutely.
Just go take the bus, a load of people from poll to poll to poll, and just vote. I mean, I grew up in Chicago. The term vote early, vote often was a common phrase in Chicago.
Yep.
But that is one of the dangers of that same-day voter registration, is that multiple voting.
Well, everything that I outlined in our new law, weakens the integrity of your vote.
Yes.
It keeps us from having fair and honest elections and from your vote counting. And, people say, I don't vote because it doesn't count. Well, there's some truth to that when you start looking at what's going on.
If there's nobody standing up for righteousness. So donation to your fund. And you know what we talked about, people say, oh, they just want the money. Hey, legal services are not cheap. You get
Absolutely.
what you pay for with a lawyer. And George Soros, in his lifetime, $38 billion that he has given. And that, like you see in these videos, $200 for a vote, right? All these money exchanging hands because votes matter. I think it was Stalin who said it doesn't matter who votes, it matters who counts the votes. So you've got to get out there and be pushing for this voter integrity, and that there are people counting the votes properly. So yes, giving money to the lawyers, helping out with those expenses, because all this stuff costs money. Doesn't just happen in their voluntary efforts. But then yes, if you can't give, or maybe in addition to, do volunteer, do go out and become a poll watcher in some capacity. And then if you don't want to get trained and be obligated to that, then like she said, go shoot some video, take a look at who's coming into the polls. What else do you recommend, if anything?
Well, those are the big ones. And I think if you just did those three things, you would be helping so much. Understand that they are counting on us not having the resources to fight folks like Soros on this. They're counting on us not being able to take it to the next level. And I have to tell you, we prayed a lot after we lost that case 10 days ago. Were we going to go into debt? How much debt were we willing to go into to fight it to the next level? And would we trust God to provide for that next level? And we decided, yes, that we would. This is where it comes down to the rubber meeting the road. Your life, your fortune, and your sacred honor. How much are you willing to put on the line for your freedom? Because I see so much happening and so quickly. And yet, if we don't stand up and fight now, we may not see our freedom in a year, because it's been, trashed in the last 6 months.
I'm gonna pull my Patriot card out of my pocket, and I did 6 years in the military, and when you do that, you basically you sign that paper, and it in essence really does say, I'm willing to give up my life to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Mm. And I look at the pictures of Arlington Cemetery, and every person, not every person, there's people buried there that don't need to be, but most persons under those tombstones there, that those rows and rows and rows in Arlington, those people gave up their lives to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And I look at those pictures today, and I think even more, that they gave all to prevent what we're seeing happening in our country today. And for us to sit back and just let that go because we're too concerned about what our friends are saying on Facebook or whatever movies on Netflix, we need to really do some thinking and some choices. So I think the choices that you gave, making a cash donation or getting involved in the poll watching or just stepping up and volunteering in some capacity, all things that we can do to help preserve, protect, and defend. So with that, we should probably wrap up. I want to thank you very much for joining us on the show. I wish you Godspeed in your appeal to the Supreme Court there in Nevada. And hopefully we can do a follow-up and you can give us some good news.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for letting me be on your show. I would ask one more thing, that those that are watching that are faith-filled people would pray for our nation and would pray for our success. This is truly one of those where God needs to show up and step in.
Yes, our whole nation needs that, but we'll pray for Nevada and the nation on that level. Sharon, thank you so much. If you would like to help Sharon out with this effort and the Election Integrity Project in Nevada, down below in the show notes, I have put some links where you can donate, get involved in some way. And I'm also going to encourage you to get involved in your own local arenas. We got to push back against voter fraud. The only thing it takes for evil to succeed is for good people to do nothing. So I encourage you to get involved. We just have a short time left before this election. We're going to see a big mess. Lots more folks than I now are predicting it. So I want to thank you for tuning in. If you have any comments that you'd like to give, go ahead and leave those comments down below. While you're down there, you can hit the subscribe button. And of course, if you want to reach me, you can do that via email, newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. You can also find me on Twitter, on Parler, and on MeWe. I'm all on there as @NewBookOfDaniel on all those platforms. Of course, you can go to Facebook and find me @NewBookOfDaniel. And you can also find my writings on issues of the day over at uncoverdc.com and also at Red State. My name is Daniel Bobinski. You've been listening to the New Book of Daniel show, produced by Shadow Trail Media. I thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you guys on the next show. Until then, be blessed.